Hi everyone, today we are going to explore music of Mexico. Just to do a little bit of a review of what we've done so far. We started by exploring music in Africa, which remember is a continent, and so we looked at several countries within Africa to explore their music. Then last week we jumped up to Ireland and explored some music from Ireland, and I did want to answer the question that I asked last week. Some people got the answer correct, some people not as much in the Google Doc. I asked why some music from Ireland was really popular in the United States when there was less was less music from Africa that was popular in the United States. And the answer that I was looking for is that the music from Ireland was in English, and so it's a lot easier for us to connect and understand that music. Even though it's from a different country, we can understand what they're saying. If you think back to that example of the music video, the current music video from Africa that I showed you, it was a really cool video and everyone enjoyed looking at the outfits and the scenery and listening to the music, but we really couldn't understand what it was about because it was in a different language. So the fact that the music from Ireland was in English was a positive reason that we might be a little bit more drawn to listen to that in the United States. So today we are going to jump down to Mexico, okay? And I'm going to enlarge the map here a little bit. For those of you who didn't know, Mexico and the United States share a border, so we're both part of North America. And you might think about how here in the North Country, we share a border with Canada, and so many of you probably have visited Canada. You might know a little bit about the Canadian culture, maybe have family members from there, and so people who live in these states obviously have a little bit more of an influence and know a little bit more about Mexico than we might up here, because it still is very far away from us. But so Texas, Arizona, California, those are all states that share the border with Mexico. And so we're going to start by looking at two different types of traditional Mexican music. And the first type is called mariachi. This might be familiar to many of you already. You might recognize that word, even if you don't quite know what it means. It's one of the more popular types of Mexican music that we hear about. And mariachi is actually a very old genre of music, old type of music. And it dates back to at least the 18th century. So it's been around for a long time. And one thing that's really interesting is that they're not sure where the name mariachi came from, but many people think that it's actually from the French word for marriage, because this type of music is played at weddings and it's often associated with love. So even though it's in Mexico, it seems like that term may have come from a French word, which is kind of neat. And so in a traditional mariachi group, you're going to have 8 violins, 2 trumpets, and at least 1 guitar. And in the video that we're going to watch in a minute, that's the exact instrumentation that their ensemble has. It does vary between groups, but that's the traditional setup that you'll see. And one thing that makes mariachi music really unique is that all of the players take turns singing the lead and the backup vocals. So if we think about maybe a traditional rock band, normally not everyone in the rock band sings, right? You might have a lead singer, guitar player, bass player, drummer. Some of those people might sing. Maybe someone's playing guitar and singing, but not everyone is going to be singing. You'll see in this listening example that every single person sings at some point, which is really neat. So remember, you can access this Google slide presentation in the classroom. And I'd like you in a moment to pause and watch this video. It's a really neat demonstration of mariachi music. They are performing outside on a street, and so there's a crowd, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to hear exactly what is happening, but there's a lot of great moments. You can hear all of the different instruments. You can hear the singing, how they trade off being the leader or singing backup. And so I really hope that you enjoy this example. So go ahead and pause and watch that now. Okay, moving on to another traditional type of Mexican music, and that's called Banda. And as you can imagine, you probably have already guessed that Banda is Spanish for band. So that's what that means. and it's a type of ensemble. And this came around a little later in the mid-19th century. And the reason that it came about later is because many of the instruments used weren't invented until then and hadn't reached Mexico until then. So that's why it's a little bit more of a recent type of music than the mariachi. This type of ensemble was modeled after military bands. And what I want you to think about when you're listening to this is that it's sort of like what we would think of as marching band music. Okay, they're not marching in these examples, and they don't always march. And I did see a couple of examples where they were, but it has a lot of the same instruments and a very similar sound. But you can hear there is an influence. Actually, there is a pretty big similarity in sound between the mariachi music and some of the listening examples we're going to be hearing in a minute. So not the same as marching band, but it's the best thing that we can compare it to that we're familiar with. And the ensembles will generally include clarinets, saxophones, trumpets, trombones, and percussion, so a lot of instruments that we are familiar with. I did see in several examples also that they will often have a sousaphone, which you may remember from your studies of American music. And this is still a very popular genre of music in Mexico. So it started actually in southern Mexico and kind of confined to one area, and it has spread and become very popular. So there are two listening examples for you here. The top one is a more traditional sound of what you might hear. Really neat. You get to see all of the instruments, and again, you really get the marching band feel from the percussion. So there's that top example. And then on the bottom, something a little bit more modern. This is a version of Baby Shark. And even if you're not a fan of that song, I want you to take a listen because they show all of the instruments up close, all the musicians, and it's really clear how they've changed this song, and you can hear the Banda sound and the influence into this pop song that we're familiar with here. It does sound different. I actually think it's really neat, though. All right. Moving on to popular music. Now, I've run into this problem in the past with looking up current popular music, things that are trending now. I've probably watched 20 music videos of the hit songs in Mexico right now. None of them were appropriate to show a middle schooler. So I apologize that I don't have anything from 2020 that's really popular at this moment. But I did find something interesting about pop music in Mexico back in the 60s and 70s. And so back in the 60s and 70s, most pop music that was produced in Mexico was just Spanish versions of English rock and roll hits. Okay, so remember, we do share a border. There's probably a little bit of influence between the United States and Mexico in sharing music, sharing other things that are popular. And so a lot of artists in Mexico would take some of the hits that we had in the United States and put them and sing them in Spanish so that people in Mexico could enjoy them as well. And so this is a really great example of this happening here. On the left, this is the song Viva Las Vegas by Elvis Presley. It might be familiar to some of you. It might be new to others, and that's okay. So take a listen to that. And then on the right, this is the Spanish version of the same song. Now, they do sound different. Obviously, the language is different, but they did change some of the music as well. But you can definitely hear the similarities, and I think it's really neat how they've made this cover of a song that was so popular in the United States, and then they were able to share it with Mexico that way. And so that was a really big trend in the 60s, 70s. There are a lot of other examples of that. And so I hope you enjoy listening and comparing those two. And so that's a brief look at some music from Mexico. Again, we're not able to cover everything, but I hope that you found some of those things and the listening examples to be interesting. I know I really enjoyed looking at some of the traditional forms of music, and you can always go online if you're interested to do a little bit more research. But your job now is to go fill out the Google Doc that's posted in the classroom, and then you'll be all set with this assignment. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.